Welcome to another edition of Carnivore Bites. I'm your host, Jeff Sherman, along with Dr. Eric Lopkin. And we have to really start things off, kick things off, post Super Bowl, haha, no pun intended. That is Super Tuesday. I want to refer to you and just your thoughts. It's all open.
Well, it was
Start with
it,
obviously probably Nikki Haley suspending her campaign, but
right. It
other
was
than that, go ahead.
it was no big surprise that Biden and Trump both ran the tables. Each one lost one primary yesterday. Trump lost Vermont to Nikki Haley, and Joe Biden lost American Samoa to some candidate nobody's ever heard of, which, quite frankly,
Essentially, no one.
is a bigger deal for Biden than it is that Trump lost one. Because when you're running essentially unopposed, it's not only bad that you have so many voters putting down for uncommitted, which happened again yesterday, but to actually
And in
lose one,
Michigan,
it happened in Michigan, it happened in Minnesota. Um, so that does not bode well for Biden. I think the biggest takeaway, though, isn't that Nikki Haley is pulling out. We'll talk about that in a moment. But I think the biggest takeaway was that Joe Biden was unable to stay awake until 10 p.m. to actually make a speech. He had a prepared statement that they sent out at 10 o'clock. No indication that he was with anybody. He was, non communicado. Really, we've got a president that can't stay up until 10 o'clock to make a speech on the biggest primary day of the year.
that's a great analysis, Dr. Lopkin, and an analysis. And I do research for the show, as you know. I have not seen. Leave it to Dr. Lopkin. And that kind of goes into what Britt Hume had in an editorial. And he's, quote, and he's no radical. He goes, Biden is palpably senile, and America sees it. I think that really goes into what you just said.
Yes, every time
Senile,
he
tired, and old.
every time he talks, every time he makes an appearance on camera, America sees that he is not this dynamo that they keep saying, oh, behind the scenes, he's got so much energy. Guess what? It doesn't matter what goes on behind the scenes. It matters what the American people see. And what they
And it
see,
doesn't go on behind the scenes, by the way.
right. And what the American public is seeing is an elderly man who is in failing health and not capable of doing the job anymore, if he ever was.
Without any question. And again, we're jumping around, but I just think it's a really opportune time to get your opinion on the State of the Union's coming up uh, tomorrow as we do the podcast on Wednesdays. Is he is he capable of pulling it off? And I mean that as, and that's not a rhetorical question. I know he's got the teleprompter, but there's been over the last several weeks, even with a teleprompter, he has effed it up. I don't know. I mean, he can get through, and that, plus it's a long speech, so he might start out as the dynamo he is behind closed doors, but can he continue it? That's a real question, Doctor Lopkin.
Well, we don't know how long the speech is going to be. There's no actual required length for a State of the Union speech. So he may do a shorter speech because he's not capable. Now, we know he had no public events on the calendar today. He had no public events on the calendar yesterday. So clearly, they're giving him whatever medication he needs, and he's taking it easy to store up any energy he can muster for the State of the Union.
No question. How important is it? I heard an analysis saying that even if he does well, it's a sugar high. I don't know if that's probably true, but let's just say if he f's it up, that could be that could get some increasing tailwinds for his demise. I don't
If
think it's just a regular State of the Union when it's like who gives a shit. It's if he does well, it's a sugar. It's almost like lose lose. If he does well, it's a sugar high. It's only going to last a week, and if he f's it up, which is a 50-50 probability, it's not good.
Yeah, if he
And let me
does
just
well,
interject one thing. Let me
go ahead.
interject one thing. If a normal president f's it up, it's kind of like, okay, whatever. But the eyes are upon him. Sorry to interrupt. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, that's very true. Presidents make mistakes all the time. I mean, Gerald Ford fell down all the time. It wasn't make or break because every other president has not had the doubts that he's actually capable of doing the job. Biden has shown that he is not healthy, he is not mentally coherent, and that's what he's fighting against. So if he does an amazing job at the State of the Union, you are going to see all of his surrogates hit the Sunday talk shows. They're going to hit the campaign circuit and they're going to go, look at this State of the Union. That's the man that's our president. Take a look at how capable he is. But they're not going to send Biden out doing interviews, and they're not going to send him out on the campaign trail much, because once he's out there, as soon as he screws up again, and we know he will, and his campaign knows he will, then it erases any gains that he got from the State of the Union. If, on the other
Okay,
hand,
wait a second. I have to interject something, though. I got to interject something. Let's talk about it. So he has a good State of the Union. His surrogates are out there, but forget about him being on the Sunday shows. Over the week after, he's going to be at something that he's going to f up on. So it completely negates. Am I not correct? Like,
yes,
regardless if he's showing up on Sunday morning, which he could
yeah,
never do. Go ahead.
that's the problem that the campaign is facing. However well he does on the State of the Union, it's all going to be wiped out the next time he has a poor performance. And there's no way to keep that from happening at this point, other than keeping him in the basement and nobody sees him again until Election Day in November, which is not feasible. So, however,
100%.
however well he does for the State of the Union, it's going to have a very limited impact, quite possibly not even to the next primary. On the other hand, if he does a poor job on the State of the Union, that's going to snowball, because again, he's not going to be able to recover from that. And he will just keep making these mistakes, and we will keep seeing him shuffling along to Marine One, shuffling along to Air Force One, and making it very obvious that this is not the intelligent, vibrant man that they keep telling us he is behind closed doors.
You know what's wrong with that whole theory? Not your theory, their theory. He was never an intelligent man. That's the funny thing about it. He was always an asshole. He was always mean. He was always egotistical. I like Greg Kelly from Newsmax said, high on ambition, low on talent. That pretty much summarized Uncle Joe before he became senile.
Yes, it does. And that's actually a big part of his problem now, because we know his memory is failing. We know there have been so many theories now from the medical community that he has dementia, that he has Parkinson's. There's all sorts of possibilities, but they all have one thing in common. And when a patient comes down with these conditions, it exacerbates the personality of the person. So if somebody is really sweet and a nice guy and he's out there for everybody, or she's there, you always want to be talking with her. When the dementia hits, when the Parkinson's hit, those character traits are amplified. So even though they can't remember, they're still very nice to be around. They're very kind. Biden was a nasty person to begin with. And so now that's the character trait that's being amplified by his medical condition. And we have heard his own staff members and members of his own administration talk about the fact that they don't want to give him bad news because he flies off the handle. He flies
even off about polling, he freaks.
Yes, he's very abusive to people. And part of that is the medical condition, but part of it is that he was never a nice guy to begin with.
Yeah, just look at his dog. There you go.
Yes.
He had to be taken away. One thing before we get back into Super Tuesday, so we look at Biden. He's obviously deteriorating and exponentially. That's not just a joke. That's true. You just look at it; it's getting wow. First of all, what do you think the chances of him effing it up at the State of the Union? I'm going to say 40.
Um, I'm going to give him a little better odds of doing a good job because, again, he hasn't had any public appearances in several days. He's going to be well rested and well prepared. I'm going to say it's about a 25% chance that he screws it up.
We will wait and see without any doubt. But and again, on the State of the Union, it looks like the Republicans are having Katie Britt. She's from Alabama, and she's going to do the rebuttals of the State of the Union. I think that was actually smart. I think the Republicans did a good job because you're contrasting Uncle Joe to someone that's bright, articulate, and young. Your thoughts?
Yeah, it was a very good choice for them. Not only because she is very articulate, she is a young person, but one, she's a woman, which helps blow out the Democrats' old white male theory of Republicans. Um, but also, she's not well known. So you're not just giving somebody the spotlight to do this, you're actually showcasing how deep the Republican bench
Yes.
is.
Great one, Lopkin. No question about it. And what if she crushes it? Could she go all of a sudden get into fold of vice presidential material? Trump
I
has
don't
a problem with women.
I don't know if
That's a stretch, but it's a thought.
yeah, I don't know if it can stretch her into the VP position, but it can certainly propel her career to a major spot at the convention, to future leadership. It can be a big launching pad for her political career. So it is a big deal for her. And quite frankly, I think the bar is going to be fairly low. So I think she's going to have an easy time crushing it.
Good point. And then, as we talked about Uncle Joe and his deterioration, it was really funny that Saturday Night Live actually did a skit, and it was pretty hard hitting. Your thoughts, Dr. Lopkin?
It was very hard hitting. Unfortunately, like so much else of Saturday Night Live, it wasn't particularly funny, but
No.
it was amazing that they weren't just making fun of Biden. They made fun of Biden's age, but they also made fun of his surrogates. They made fun of Gavin Newsom. They made fun of Karine Jean Pierre. Um, they brought in, they made fun of Mayorkas. And it was them repeating the phrase over and over again. All of these people defending Biden, saying, oh, behind closed doors, he's a dynamo. And they're crediting him with the most ridiculous achievements. I loved Mayorkas saying he actually parkoured over the border wall and did a backflip off the wall. Seriously, I mean, most people can't do that, never mind somebody as decrepit as Biden. So they did exaggerate it quite a bit to go for the humor. The humor, again, fell flat. But the big deal of this is that for Joe Biden to lose Saturday Night Live and for them to go after him, in fact, for any Democrat at this point to lose Saturday Night Live is a big deal. This is a bastion of liberal ideals. They made a 4-year run at doing nothing but Trump jokes. And now that
Yes,
Trump
and
is
there's always talking about. Yeah, it is interesting also when you look at the overall, real quick. I don't want to give it too much time. Liberal media. Look at the Biden's appearance on Seth Meyers. That was like scary. First of all, Seth Meyers is about as funny as a heart attack or hemorrhoids, and his audience is about as big as carnivore radio. Um, and Biden was just, it was, it's all, I love that. It's extremely rehearsed. It looks like it's spontaneous. And he still effed it up and
yeah,
came across as an idiot. And
Yeah,
the ice cream was pathetic.
his appearance on Seth Meyers was incredibly scripted, which again goes to show that he can't handle spontaneity. This is not a good trait in the president. This is
No,
not this
it's
is not something we want in the leader of the free world who has to make decisions on a moment's notice.
it's funny. Even Italian media, I guess they have their own comedy shows. A regular feature is a Biden spoof of him falling over, sniffing some kid's hair. I mean, the gigs. I mean, when you even look at it, when he gives a UN speech, Trump does a UN speech, everyone's there. Okay, half the UN was gone. No one takes him seriously. Let's just cut the shit. And also, how dumb is the elitists in the Democratic Party to think America's that effing stupid to think, yeah, they see, don't believe your lying eyes, right? You see Biden barely be able to get through, like, reading a children's book. But yet, behind the scenes, he's a Mensa candidate, smarter than Einstein, and stronger than Arnold Schwarzenegger in his prime. Yeah, please, come on, smoke
Well,
another joint.
it's not just about Biden. The Democratic Party has been doing this for years. Remember 2020 and the peaceful protests that they were talking
Mm-hmm.
about peaceful protests while the reporters are standing there with buildings on fire in the background. There was nothing
Yes.
peaceful about them. Everything about the economy. Oh, the economy is doing fantastic. We don't understand why people don't believe it. Well, they don't believe it because food prices are up. I believe it's a total of 11%
Yeah, it's
over.
for the first time in 33 years. Food costs represent 11% of the household budget. First time since I think 1991.
Yes, and some segments of your grocery bill have actually gone up as much as 33% over the course of Biden's presidency. So they keep saying, "Oh, my favorite is they keep yelling about, well, crime is down across the board. The Republicans are making it up that crime is up. Well, what you have is DAs who are not prosecuting, democratically, elected DAs who were funded by George Soros. So you have
Yep.
police departments who are not making arrests because they know there's no point because they're not going to be
And there's no
prosecuted.
police anyway. The
Right.
openings for policemen are crazy.
So, of course, you have fewer crimes being passed up the line to the FBI statistics because they're not being arrested, they're not being charged. Hence, there's no crime. So, this doesn't
And there's
mean,
no police to arrest them.
right, this doesn't mean that crime is down. It means that the statistics are being rigged. And anytime somebody talks to me about crime being down, I go back to a line from the TV show The Wire, where one of the cops says it's called juking the stats. Burglaries become larcenies, rapes disappear, and that's how majors become captains and captains become colonels. That's what this is. It's juking the stats. The Democrats have been trying to do this all along. Don't believe what you see, believe what we tell you. And unfortunately, so much of the media has played along with this. Now, I was amazed at stories from the New York Times and Washington Post. New York Times, I don't know how long they were working on this, but they posted quotes and photos on their social media feed of Democrats that were thrilled that Biden is running. They're so excited to be able to vote for him again in 2024. Really, every poll says 13% of Democrats think he's capable of doing the job. Or and yet the New York
Well,
Times,
that goes into the bigger question of the whole media. You look at CNN, we've talked about them. It's hysterical. Their ratings are beyond in the crapper, right? And especially in key demographics, they're just awful. There's reports that they're median average viewership age is approaching 60, and it's really interesting. It looks like some of their rock stars, yikes, like Anderson Cooper, I never got, Jay Tapper, and the other idiots, are high price, low ratings, are in the sights, in the gun sights of being laid off. What do you think of that?
Well, I think it's about time. CNN is spending far too much on these anchors that they're not reporters. They don't know
Huge
from news.
salaries.
Yeah, they don't know from news, and nobody believes them anymore. And part of the reason is that they are going out there with their agenda, and the agenda is getting worse and worse. I was absolutely amazed by a video clip from last night on MSNBC where the panel was acknowledging that the number one issue that voters say is important to them right now is immigration. And they were actually making fun of voters in non southern border states for being concerned about this. This is not just a border issue anymore. You see New York, Chicago, Georgia, these areas are falling apart. The city of Denver announced they may have to let go all of their hourly employees from their parks and recreation department just to pay for care of the migrants. So, yes, this is not just an issue for Texas, Arizona, and California, but the folks at MSNBC were mocking their own viewers for being concerned about this.
Well, it doesn't surprise me with MSNBC, but I'll tell you, really interesting. You brought up Denver. I was talking to a friend last night. We worked for the same company at one time and have a mutual friend that's now in Denver. He got a letter, believe it or not, from the mayor basically requesting that he open his own house to allow migrants to stay there. That's a fact.
Yeah, that's actually been happening in places around the country. The mayor of Chicago has considered that. It is absolutely ridiculous. You decided to be a sanctuary city. Now you see what that actually entails. And you know what? If you can't afford it, change your laws. Say, we are no longer a sanctuary city. We do not have the budget to deal with this.
That would admit that they're wrong, Dr. Lopkin, wouldn't it?
Well, yes,
They're
it would.
incapable of that.
And quite frankly, the mayors of most of these sanctuary cities are Democrats. They should go en masse to the White House and say, you need to reverse the 93 executive orders that you passed on day one that caused this border crisis and fix the problem.
That would be excellent. You know, you talked about the crime and how we've been trying to we've been gaslighted. You have governor of New York, and again a Mensa candidate, basically having a bill requesting the National Guard go in the subways to help protect against the rapid crime. And about 3 days before that, again, she's a real genius. She put or signed an authorization to explore reparations for African Americans, even though we look at businesses that can't get out of New York, people can't get out of New York fast enough. And also, additionally, the genius might want to think about that. New York wasn't a slave state. Genius. Your
Right.
thoughts?
New York was not a slave state, but the simple fact of the matter is they don't have the money to
There
fuel
you go.
their existing budget. How do they think they're going to get the money to pay whatever reparations they ultimately decide should be paid? It's going to go the same way that California's reparations are going. There's going to be a committee investigating it. The committee is going to say, "Oh, yes, to soothe our liberal guilt, we need to provide reparations, and this is what we think is fair." and then that's going to go to the state government, and the state government's going to go, yeah, we have no money for this, and it's going to sit on a shelf.
Well, you know, I have a better one for you. I think this is great. Look at the sanctuary city situation, Martha's Vineyard, other places like that. I think it would be fantastic if, because, you know, let's face it, the New York legislature is broken. They do pass it because they're as dumb as rocks, right? And then all the little liberals get their little bill. Huh? What? Reparations? No, no, no. We were kidding. Wouldn't that be great, Dr. Lopkin?
Well, honestly, what would happen is the taxpayers of New York would be on the hook for huge tax increases,
No, I
and
know
you
that, but wouldn't it be
and
funny
you
when
would
all of a
see.
sudden, if it
Well, no, no,
actually
no. But
came home and they'd be, go ahead.
what you would see is an increase in the speed of people fleeing New York, and without
Can it
those
get
tax,
faster?
it can. But without those
Okay.
taxpayers, they have no chance of making this happen. And New York is already losing both businesses and individuals. In fact, New York is essentially stealing tax money from other states at this point because their tax policy is if you work remotely for a New York based company and you don't live in New York, you still have to pay income taxes to New York State and New York City if it's a New York City business. Even though you use no New York resources, you don't go into New York for work, you're never there, they are still taking your tax money. And now other states are starting to get angry about this, especially here in Connecticut, where we're recording this. The governor of Connecticut is fighting back because they are taxing Connecticut residents for using New York state resources that they never use.
We'll see how that unfolds. But yes, I think the governor is a complete idiot, and she's accelerating New York's demise along with the great mayor. But let's get back. We diverged a little bit, but I think it was all good. Your thoughts, Dr. Lopkin, on Super Tuesday?
All right, well, we talked about the big takeaway of Biden. It was no surprise that both Biden and Trump ran the tables last night. It was expected. What was also expected was Nikki Haley pulling out. Um, she had no public events scheduled past Super Tuesday. Her campaign had no advertising scheduled past Super Tuesday. So it had become pretty obvious that she had planned to suspend her campaign on Super Tuesday. And there was some comments made last night and some things she had said in her announcement that she was suspending today that finally made me understand why she stayed in so long and why, while it's not going to help her any, a smart Republican strategist can use this to the Republicans' advantage. And that was a comment she made about the fact that her parents were first generation immigrants. They moved here. And her mother got the chance yesterday to vote for her daughter to be president of the United States. Now, I think she actually stuck around longer than she should have in order to accomplish that. I think it's a little selfish to, spend all that money to make your mother feel good. But if you take that story, this was the first Republican woman to win a primary. She did win the District of Columbia and Vermont. She is the daughter of first generation immigrants. You take that story along with Tim Scott's story about how he achieved his senatorial career, and it completely blows the race story of the Democrats out of the water. It blows
Very good point.
apart the identity politics that the Democrats have been relying on. And you're already seeing the identity politics game fall apart on them, as now in the past few polls, the majority of Hispanics are now supporting Trump. Not by much, but it's, I believe it was like 51%. You're
Still
seeing
huge.
Yeah, you're seeing African Americans, his support, the support for Trump in the African American community is up 20% from where it was in 2020, which is also
Especially with
huge.
males.
Yes, which is also huge. So these stories blow apart the narrative that the Democrats are trying to push.
I would agree with that. I think just from a political strategy standpoint, she would have been much better off. Yeah, I got the mother voting for after New Hampshire. It was a fairly strong showing. She outdid the
Yep.
polls, and last person standing besides Trump, she would have gone out as a hero. I think she kind of went out. She gave me a little more, a little too vindictive at the end. But I think it'll be a big Maya Copa. Everything will be groovy, and she'll live for another day. She's still very young. What do you think of Steve Garvey now pitted against Adam Schiff, who in his acceptance speech was heckled by pro-Palestinians? Surprise, surprise. When we talk about Democrats in California, but Steve Garvey, that's an interesting situation, mano on
Steve,
mano against
yes,
Pencilneck.
Steve Garvey has statewide support going back to his days in the in the LA Dodgers and the San Diego Padres. He is loved by Californians. He is a
Yes,
political newcomer, and Schiff actually spent $12 million attacking Steve Garvey, which backfired. It actually raised Steve Garvey's profile and could very well be why he is in the general election. Now, for those of our listeners who are not familiar with California politics, California's primary is very different from most primaries. No matter what party you are in, you all run in the same primary, and the top two candidates are the ones that move on to the general election. So you don't have to have a Democrat and a Republican in the general election. You can actually have, and have in the past, had two Democrats running for that seat. Well, Schiff was more afraid of his Democratic opponents than he is
socialist.
of Steve Garvey, because he thinks because Garvey is a Republican, he'll be easier to pick off. Well, experts all across say that's not going to be a case. Schiff is not well liked. The fact that
Wonder why.
he was attacking his fellow Democrats didn't help him. He got nasty against Steve Garvey in the primary, which also did not help him. And the fact of the matter is, the only thing he has in his favor, he's actually never accomplished anything. What he has in his
No,
favor is the anti Trump movement. Because the only thing that Schiff is known for, and it's why he got a national audience,
besides lying.
is spreading lies about the Steele dossier, about his claims over and over again that there was overwhelming evidence of Trump's guilt, which for some reason never materialized.
Meanwhile, as in his department chair, he should have been paying attention to what he actually should be paying attention. That is national threats, which he was asleep at the switch. But I also think, what do you think it is? Very unscientific. There's also something called the alpha male syndrome, and then you have pencil neck. Okay, shifty shift against Steve Garvey. Yeah, he's older. He's probably 75 now, something like that. Looks good, alpha male, accomplished athlete. I mean, you have the biggest wimp maybe in the history of America versus a baseball legend slash hero. I think that has some legs, Dr. Lopkin.
It does have some legs. You also have the stark difference in their viewpoints. No matter what he does, he's not going to be able to paint Steve Garvey as an ultra MAGA conservative because Garvey isn't. He is very centrist, and his entire campaign has been about doing what is best for the state of California and bringing California and helping bring the nation back together to accomplish more. Schiff is completely about dividing the nation, attacking the ultra MAGA, which, let's face it, there's not a big ultra MAGA population in the state of California. But you also have to look at the fact that Schiff is pushing the same policies that have resulted in people fleeing from California.
The only state that's accelerating the exodus faster than New York. I think that's a good point. I think time is not in Pencilneck's favor. Yes, Garvey had a long, long road to haul, but I think time is in his favor because just like Hillary, the more time you see or the more exposure you have to Adam Schiff, the more you want to throw up. There was the court cases, the Supreme Court ruling against Colorado, and with that Maine, the nutcase, uh, um, she's pulled her efforts to withdraw Trump's candidacy in Maine. The big win for Trump, and it gets to the real bigger issue, Dr. Lopkin. It was no surprise it was going to be overturned unanimously. The whole court case, you have Fannie, that's pretty much imploded. Your thoughts on where all this crap is going and impact on the election? It's getting less and less, isn't it, Dr. Lopkin? And it's making possibly playing to Trump's favor because it shows how stupid these people are and how bullshit these charges actually are when they see the light of the day, just like a cockroach.
It is actually working in Trump's favor. And you now have a sizable percentage of Democrats who are saying, we have to stop this. We have to stop the lawfare. We're only encouraging him, we're making him stronger. The Supreme Court decision, first of all, was expected, but it is
Mm-hmm.
absolutely amazing how the liberal pundits, the morons on The View, started
A
attacking
dying class.
that started
Go ahead.
attacking the Supreme Court as being overly partisan and oh they're puppets of MAGA. No, this was 9-0. This was this was judges appointed by Obama. This was judges appointed by Biden. This was a whole not again unanimously because this was a step too far that the Democrats were taking. And the fact of the matter is, quite frankly, there's another court case coming in front of them, the case about Trump's immunity. It is widely accepted that they are going to find against Trump in that one because
Yes.
following the law, which is what the Supreme Court has done over and over again since the conservative majority took over. Because for 20, 30 years, the left has been used to having a rubber stamp from the Supreme Court. And again, going back to Roe v. Wade, Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg kept saying this was bad case law. It was going to be overturned. It was a political decision. and Congress needed to ratify it if they didn't want to see it go away. And of course, both during the Biden administration and during the Obama administration, they had complete control over both houses and the White House, and they did nothing. They got used to having a politically motivated court, and that is no longer the case. And to be fair, I would never say that a judge like Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg was politically motivated. There were always justices on both sides of the aisle that tried to stick as close to the Constitution as possible. But
Okay, the Supreme Court case that's got it. You know, with the immunity is not going to happen.
No.
But how about the Fannie Willis case and the Smith case? That's the two ones that have relevancy. Where are they now? Willis, I think that's not going to make it before the election, and I believe the Smith case is not going to make it before the election either. Your thoughts?
The Smith case is going to depend on how the Supreme Court decides the immunity. Realistically, the Supreme Court should decide. Now, I don't know if they will or not, but they should decide that while Trump is claiming a president has complete immunity, the Supreme Court should decide that the president does have limited immunity. Now, with that limited immunity, that would screw up Jack Smith's case.
But we know that's not going to happen. But I still think the case is on shaky.
It's not going to happen. We don't know that's going to happen. Because if they say that the president has no immunity, that opens up for any Republican attorney general in 2025 to put Joe Biden on trial for abandoning the border and letting terrorists through. For any decision that Biden made, if they don't say that the president has limited immunity for decisions made during the commission of his position, it is going to open up a bigger can of worms than anybody has imagined. So I think they will split that hair, but it's one they've got to split very carefully.
I would agree with that assessment. I don't know how it's going to affect the Smith situation. I think the Fannie Willis, that train has left the station. But I think overall, the big firewall of legalized partisanship, I think the impact is waning daily. Your thoughts on that? Not about the legalese, about the whole shit.
The impact is waning daily. And in fact, Trump really, from what I understand from people who are inside his inner circle, did not expect to win most of these cases. He wasn't actually playing to win. He was playing to delay. His whole strategy, and the strategy of a good part of his legal team, was to delay as many of these as possible so that a verdict did not come in until after the election, when it wouldn't matter anymore. And at this point, so many of the cases have fallen apart. You saw the New York case where the judge decided he was guilty of fraud. Well, this is going to be overturned on appeal because legal experts on both sides have said there was no basis in law for this decision.
Because it was disproportionate penalty. Right. That's also in the Constitution.
Yes. You have Fannie Willis, who completely destroyed the credibility of her office. So if they keep her on, it's going to be an uphill battle for them to convict, because nobody is going to believe anything this office says. If they remove her,
I think that case is gone.
It's probably going to go away because they're going to have to take the entire DA's office off the case, as I understand it, find a new jurisdiction, and then start all over again. There's no way to do that before the election. You have
I find
other.
that hard to believe that she can remain where she is. And if she does, it still falls flat on her face because where she went to law school, I have no idea, but I'm going to apply probably as we get done with this show because I'm sure it's open admissions. She is dumber than rocks. I mean, the whole strategy or a whole basis for what really happened, you'd have to be like smoking 1,000 pounds of pot to believe that.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
the
carry around. Yeah, I always go on vacation with five
right,
thousand dollars in cash. Yeah,
the
okay, happens all the time. Yep.
the big impact of this is actually going to be the cumulative impact of all of these district attorneys, attorney generals, partisan judges showing the American people that we are doing everything in our power to remove Donald Trump so you don't get to vote for him. And
I think
that,
that narrative is becoming more and more, seeing more and
uh,
more of the light of day, and
yes,
I think
and
it's getting traction.
that is backfiring on them because, first of all, it's encouraging the Republican base to unify behind Trump. It is encouraging independents to go, wait a minute. The Democrats keep saying Trump is a threat to democracy. But one, we were better off economically and security wise in the world when he was in office. And two, they're literally changing laws and manipulating the courts to try to get him off the ballot and remove him from the election. So, who in reality is the danger to democracy?
That is a great point because that is real buoyancy. Yeah, you're talking. He's a threat to democracy. Well, for 4 years, what happened? Nothing. Everything was fine. So that's a bunch of bullshit. Unless you're a moron watching The View or MSNBC, and then you need to go see someone. Other than that, who's the one who's playing with democracy? Raskin and all the other losers. That guy I cannot stand.
And
Now,
in
back to
fact,
the
wait a minute. In fact, two Democratic uh, Congress people came out right after the Supreme Court said that the states could not remove Trump from the ballot to try to pass a bill that has no chance of passing the House, never mind the Senate, but try to pass a bill determining that, yes, in fact, Donald Trump is an insurrectionist and is ineligible to run for office. Now, the big problem with this is that's not something that Congress can determine. That has
Does
to
that
be
really? Does it?
determined
Whoa,
in
whoa, whoa! I got
courts.
that. I got that. But does that actually make a difference in their minds? No, it doesn't. Got Debbie
No,
Wasserman Schultz
it
and
doesn't make a difference
Raskin,
in their
two
minds,
geniuses.
but it does show that, yes, the Democrats are willing to manipulate laws in order to get their way. So the more
Well,
they
surprise,
yell
surprise.
that Trump is a threat to democracy, that claim becomes more and more hollow the more they try to manipulate things.
Totally agree. And on the last on the agenda is strategy, and Uncle Joe don't go together. But his team or him, I don't think he does anything, has a new strategy of going mano on mano with Trump and trying to get in Trump's face, trying to agitate him. Someone else, I'd say, yeah, okay, that might be a good strategy. Trump can be unhinged, obviously. But Uncle Joe, at this stage of his dementia, I think that plays right into Trump. I think it actually could be comical. Your thoughts?
If Biden had more on the ball, it
If,
might be
yes.
effective. If Biden were capable of actually debating Trump, it might have worked. But to go after Trump, to keep saying, oh, he's a threat to democracy, he's a loser, and then not be able to debate him just blows up the entire strategy. And even more importantly, every time he starts talking, he's not simply going after Trump. He keeps using the right wing MAGA Republicans. It's the MAGA Republicans. Well, guess what? That's not attacking Trump. That's attacking the Republican voters. That is
I
his
don't even think it's that. I don't even think it's that complicated.
that is
I think
his
you got
basket
someone.
of
I
deplorables. And
I
we
got
saw
that, but
how well that worked for Hillary.
it didn't work out well. It's basically a hollow rhetoric now, but it's even more simplistic than that. He's going to try to get in your face with Trump, and he's not going to be able to pull it off. He's going to come up with one-liners that halfway through it he's going to be stumbling. It's a disaster. So we'll see how that works out. I don't think it's going to work out well. But Dr. Lopkin, we were away last week. My apologies, but things are working well for Carnivore Radio, aren't they?
They are. And in fact, I don't usually track this, but I got a notification just this morning from Instagram, of all places, that
From where? I'm sorry.
from Instagram,
Okay,
that
got it.
the Exvadio News podcasts, which Carnivore is part of, have increased their reach by 1,200% over the last several
Whoa,
months. Yes. So
very good.
we are finding new audiences everywhere.
Excellent. And it's well deserved, I might add. I love self patronizing things, yes. And they can also, our viewers, our listeners can actually even contribute to the show, can't they, Dr. Lopkin?
They can. Let us know what you think by going to the Carnivore Radio Facebook page and messaging us. You can also go to xvadio.com/connect. Let us know what you're thinking. And of course, you can catch every episode of Carnivore Bites at xvadio.com, the Carnivore Radio website, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Audible, Amazon Music, and other platforms that respect freedom of speech.
Thank you, Dr. Lopkin. As always, great insight and insight. Even though I do research on many of your points, I have not heard. So great. We'll be back next week.
We'll see you then.